when Iraq executed its dictator on live TV, the chilling end of Saddam Hussein. For nearly a quarter of a century, Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with fear, his face painted on walls, his voice echoing through radios, and his name whispered in terror. But by the end of 2006, that same man, once untouchable, stood in a small, cold room facing the fate he had given to thousands. Cameras were rolling. Guards stood ready. The world was about to witness something almost unimaginable, the live execution of Iraq's former dictator. What followed wasn't just the end of a man, but the closing of one of the darkest chapters in Middle Eastern history. Tonight, we walk through the final hours of Saddam Hussein, from his capture and trial to the haunting morning of December 30th, when the rope was placed around his neck. If you believe history's truths must never be forgotten, make sure to subscribe for more unforgettable prison documentary stories. The story of how Saddam Hussein went from ruler to prisoner begins in March 2003, when the United States and its allies invaded Iraq. The goal was clear: to end Saddam's rule, dismantle his regime, and bring him to justice for his long list of crimes. The invasion was swift and overwhelming. Within weeks, cities fell one by one, and Baghdad, once the beating heart of Saddam's empire, descended into chaos. On April 9, 2003, the world witnessed a symbolic moment that marked the collapse of his power. In Baghdad's Firdos Square, a towering statue of Saddam was pulled down by U.S. troops as cheering Iraqis struck it with shoes, a gesture of ultimate disrespect in Arab culture. The man who had once seemed immortal was suddenly gone, vanishing into the desert with a small group of loyalists. For the next 8 months, Saddam was the most wanted man on earth. American intelligence launched Operation Red Dawn, a massive hunt that spanned hundreds of miles. Soldiers raided safe houses, questioned family members, and followed every lead. His face was printed on the Ace of Spades card, the top target in the deck of Iraq's most wanted figures. Slowly, the circle around him began to close. On the night of December 13, 2003, the hunt ended near Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. American soldiers uncovered a small underground hideout beneath a farmhouse, a cramped spider hole barely large enough for one man. When they pulled back the cover, there he was. Saddam Hussein, once a man of palaces and gold, now sat in dirt and darkness. His hair was long, his beard untrimmed, his clothes filthy. A pistol lay beside him, but he didn't fire. The man who had ruled through fear surrendered without a fight. After his capture, Saddam was held under tight U.S. guard for more than 2 years. He was moved between secure facilities, never knowing where he would be next. Guards later said he was calm, even courteous at times, a man still trying to project authority despite being caged. But the world hadn't forgotten his crimes. The time had come for him to face judgment. In October 2005, Saddam's trial began in Baghdad before the Iraqi High Tribunal. The courtroom was a fortress, surrounded by barbed wire, guarded by tanks, and protected by armed soldiers. Inside, the tension was electric. Saddam refused to recognize the court's authority, shouting at judges, calling them traitors, and declaring himself still the rightful president of Iraq. But the evidence against him was undeniable. The trial focused on a single devastating event, the 1982 Dujail massacre. That year, Saddam's convoy had been attacked by Shia rebels while driving through the small farming town of Dujail. Though he was unharmed, his response was ruthless. Iraqi security forces raided the town, arresting hundreds, men, women, and children. Many were tortured, executed, or vanished into prisons. In total, 148 people were condemned to death in retaliation for the attack. Their farms were destroyed, their homes burned, and their families left in despair. For years, the Dujail massacre had been a story whispered in fear. But now, in front of cameras and the world, the truth was being told. Survivors took the stand, describing how their loved ones were dragged away. Mothers spoke of sons they never saw again. Farmers told how their orchards were bulldozed as punishment. Each testimony chipped away at the myth of Saddam's invincibility. On November 5, 2006, the verdict was announced. Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death by hanging. Alongside him, 2 senior officials, his half-brother Barzan al-Tikriti and Awad al-Bandar, the judge who had approved the Dujail executions, also received death sentences. News of the verdict spread instantly. Across Shia neighborhoods in Baghdad, fireworks filled the night sky as people celebrated. For them, this was long-awaited justice, a moment to honor the memory of those lost. But in Saddam's hometown of Tikrit and across many Sunni areas, the reaction was anger. Supporters claimed the trial was revenge, not justice. The country, already torn by sectarian conflict, became even more divided. Despite these tensions, Iraq's new government made a swift decision. Saddam would be executed before the end of the year. Under Iraqi law, once the appeal was denied, the execution had to take place within 30 days. On December 26th, that final appeal was rejected. The countdown began. Saddam spent his last few days at Camp Justice, a heavily guarded compound in northern Baghdad. Those who saw him said he remained defiant, refusing special privileges or comfort. His final meal was boiled chicken and rice, simple, ordinary, almost symbolic. He ate slowly, then spent his last night in prayer, reciting verses from the Quran. The execution was scheduled for December 30th, 2006, the morning of Eid al-Adha, one of Islam's holiest holidays, a day meant for mercy and forgiveness. But for Saddam, it would be the day his own mercy ran out. Before dawn, guards entered his cell. Dressed in a dark coat and white shirt, Saddam stood and walked calmly toward the gallows. Witnesses later said he looked composed, even proud. As he entered the execution chamber, he refused the black hood offered to him. He wanted his face uncovered, to meet death with eyes wide open. The room itself was small and bare. A wooden platform, a trapdoor, and a single thick rope, measured precisely to ensure a swift drop. Around him stood judges, officials, and guards. Some recited prayers, others muttered curses. As the noose was placed around his neck, Saddam reportedly whispered a final prayer. At 6:05 a.m., the lever was pulled. The trapdoor opened. In less than a second, Saddam Hussein, the man who once ruled an entire nation, was gone. His body hung motionless, the sound of the rope snapping echoing through the chamber. For a moment, there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Some witnesses shouted in celebration, others argued angrily. Within minutes, someone pulled out a cell phone and began recording. That leaked footage, raw, shaky, and real, would soon circle the globe. Millions watched as the dictator met his end, his final words drowned by the chants of his enemies. By sunrise, Saddam's body was wrapped in a white shroud and flown by helicopter to his hometown of Al-Ajah. Under the faint light of dawn, he was buried beside his sons Uday and Qusay, both killed 3 years earlier in a firefight with U.S. forces. The burial was quiet, attended by tribal elders, relatives, and a few loyalists. Within hours, the grave was sealed, marking the end of a man who had once seemed eternal. But Saddam's death did not bring peace. Instead, it deepened Iraq's wounds. Shia and Sunni militias clashed violently in the streets. Sectarian killings surged. The execution that was meant to close a chapter instead reopened old divisions. For the world, the image of Saddam's final moments became one of the most haunting scenes of the Iraq War. A dictator brought down not by armies, but by justice. For Iraqis, it was a reminder that the ghosts of power do not vanish easily. Dear friends, Saddam Hussein's execution was more than the end of one man. It was the fall of an era built on fear, blood, and control. It showed that even those who seem invincible will one day face the weight of their actions. Yet it also left a question behind. Can a nation ever truly heal from decades of tyranny? Perhaps the real story isn't about how Saddam died, but about what came after. A nation still struggling to rise from the ruins he left behind.